tiny bit of background on my grandparents. They both emigrated from Sweden in 1896.
Together?
Separately. My grandfather went first to the lumber lands near Menominee, and then after several years moved to Chicago. And according to family tradition, he at least once, maybe sometimes, came across the ice to attend church at Sister Bay Baptist Church. Well, that would have been in the late 1890s.
Okay.
My grandmother left Sweden when she was 14, arrived when after her birth, after she had turned 15, with knowing no English, going to join the family of an uncle of hers who lived in Chicago. So she arrived with a note pinned to her coat with his name and address, arrived in New York, and somehow did get to Chicago.
The courage that these people had.
Yes. So she went to Chicago, to the south side of Chicago, where there were other Swedes, but in particular this uncle. My grandmother was a charter member of Ephraim Swedish Baptist Church on the south side of Chicago. And when my grandfather moved to Chicago, he started going to Elam, and he spotted my grandmother as the prettiest girl in Elam.
Aren't they always?
And from pictures of her, she was indeed a beauty. And so they married in 1904.
The church was the connecting link.
He worked eventually as a pattern maker. He worked at a foundry in Chicago. Chicago Malleable Castings. Well, John R. Peterson's wife had a sister who had a Door County connection, who lived some.
Now we're touching our first connection.
Yes.
And that would have been about when?
Well, I'll get there.
Okay.
Very shortly. So John R., as he was regularly known, suggested that my grandparents come up and look at some property. This was the time of expansion of orchards, and so probably in 1927. Did they come up in 1926 to look? I don't know. In 1927, they definitely came and bought this property that John R's wife, and John R's sister had, well, owned, I think had inherited. The property was the next to last property on the north side of Kew, the next to last property before Town Line Road. Not on the corner of Town Line Road, but the next before it.
We're on Kew going east from Ephraim, but you're in the village limits.
Yes, oh yes. And we're going past what was the Gorski and then the Mickelson house that has the white picket fence. Mm-hmm. And immediately beyond that, the Hauser property was part of the 17 or 20 acres that my grandparents bought.
Was it established as an orchard when he bought it?
Oh no. There was a two-story house on it. It is now the Hauser two-story house. It had been built as a chicken coop, but not used. But it had the metal chicken fittings.
Is that the slogan, build it and they will come?
Perhaps. My grandfather would bring the younger children up in April at the school break. And eventually, at least, this wouldn't have been the first stage, but they did planting then. But before there could be planting, of course, there had to be preparation. a lot of work with, I think, I've seen in one picture a stone boat, though not used as a stone boat, more often a wagon, to pick stones, to get rid of stumps and whatever, or pick stones and make a humongously long stone fence.
Well, the purpose was not to build a fence, I presume.
Oh,
but
right.
To find a piece of
Get-
tillable
yes,
soil.
get-
in this-
get the soil
in this
clear enough.
escarpment, which is
Yes,
basically all
oh
rock.
yes,
up
as
there.
shallow as anything. And so when finally it was ready to have cherries planted, they hired a Swede from Bailey's Harbor to come and dynamite for every single cherry tree that was planted on the 17 acres or so of cherries.
Oh my. And they built transplanted young,
cherries, grafted onto willow roots, which penetrated the cracks made by the dynamite.
it's amazing they got enough moisture to grow.
Yes,
Water that went through those cracks.
Yes, but somehow they did. And so it continued. My grandfather would bring up my grandmother and whatever of their children were still at home to work during the summer.